She was never meant to be remembered. Her name isn't carved into stone, nor sung in epics. But she lived, not as a wife, not as a slave, not quite a free woman either, but as something in between. She was a concubine in the Roman Empire. And in a world ruled by men in togas, marching legions, and emperors who claimed the gods whispered in their ears, she carved out a place for herself in the shadowed corners of marble villas and burning ambition. Her story is not found in the pages of history books, but it was lived, breath by breath, in silence and silk, behind closed doors and beneath borrowed titles. She was born into nothing. Or perhaps something, the daughter of a merchant or maybe a slave girl. Her future was never hers to hold. In the Roman world, power flowed like wine. It trickled down from senators and generals, pooled at the feet of the rich and barely touched those below. She was noticed before she understood what it meant to be watched. Eyes followed her through the market, across courtyards, behind veils. And one day she was taken, not violently but inevitably. A wealthy Roman man, perhaps a senator or a retired soldier with land, saw in her not a child, not a person, but a possibility. She was offered a new life. A bed with soft linens. Grapes and honeyed wine. Safety, if she obeyed. She was not a wife. A Roman citizen could only marry another citizen, and she was not one. But she could be his concubine, an accepted mistress, a partner without a title, love without legality. The arrangement was common. The law recognized it. A man could take a concubine if he was already married, or if he didn't wish to marry someone of lower status. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't scandalous. It was Roman. And so she entered his domus, his house. She had a room, clothes finer than she had ever known, servants who resented her, and rules that were never spoken but always understood. Her days began before dawn. Bathing, dressing, being prepared not for herself but for him. She learned how to move silently, how to listen without being seen. She was expected to be beautiful, compliant, and invisible until summoned. And when he came to her, at night in the quiet, she was his completely. Not just her body but her thoughts, her laughter, her loyalty. She had to become what he needed, whether it was comfort or pleasure, a muse or a mother. She could never contradict him. She could never claim him. When he took her to the garden, he didn't walk beside her, she walked behind. At feasts, she sat near but never among the guests. When visitors came, she vanished into hallways. And yet, within the private walls of the villa, she mattered. She saw him in his moments of weakness, when he drank too much or when the Senate turned on him. She knew his secrets, the ones he would never say aloud. She bore his children, and in that she gained both power and pain. If a concubine bore a child, the father could recognize the child legally, but the woman remained a concubine. A mother of his blood, but never of his name. If he chose to marry someone else, she could be dismissed, sent away like a servant with nothing even after years. Still she endured, because she was more than a concubine. She was a strategist, a quiet observer in a world of loud politics. She listened to senators' gossip when they thought she wasn't there. She knew which wine made him talk, which words calmed his rage. In a world where women had few choices, she turned silence into survival. Other women envied her jewels but not her chains. Wives hated her in whispers but envied her closeness. Slaves feared her influence. And she kept her head down and learned. But not all concubines lived in marble villas. Many were former slaves taken after conquest, Gauls, Egyptians, Syrians, girls captured during war, given to Roman generals as trophies. Their lives were harder. No privacy, no say, no end. If they pleased their masters, they survived. If they didn't, they were sold. Some were concubines in the eyes of their owners, but in truth, they were prisoners in silk. And yet, even in this brutality, stories emerged. Some won their freedom. Some rose to power. One, the concubine of a wealthy trader, learned his business secrets and took over his affairs after his death, becoming a wealthy patroness. Another bore a son who became a respected philosopher. In the cracks of Rome's rigid society, some women bloomed. Love was rare, but it existed. There were Roman men who fell for their concubines, deeply, foolishly. Some freed them and married them despite scandal. The poet Propertius wrote verses to a woman many believed was once his concubine. He called her Cynthia, wild, clever, dangerous. Their love was a battlefield, but it burned bright. Most, though, were not remembered in poems. Most concubines vanished into time, unburied, unnamed, unmissed. And yet they shaped Rome in quiet ways. They raised the sons who would become generals. They whispered in the ears of powerful men. They carried the burdens of empire in their wombs and on their backs. In the cold marble of Roman architecture, their stories are missing, not because they weren't there but because history didn't think them worthy of ink. But they were there, brushing oil into their hair, watching the city through lattice windows, waiting for footsteps in the hall that might mean safety or the end. They endured childbirth without medicine, jealous wives without protection, loneliness without escape. But they also laughed, quietly with other women in the garden. They passed gossip, raised children, watched empires shift from one tyrant to another. And in the silence of night, when even Rome slept, they wondered if they could ever be free. Freedom was a strange thing. A concubine could be freed by her master, but often only after years of service or in his will. Some never asked. Freedom without protection could mean poverty. Being his concubine, for all its cruelty, offered a kind of twisted security. In his house she had value. Outside she was forgotten. So she stayed. Many did. And as years passed, the girl became a woman. The softness left her eyes. She raised his children, taught them Latin and patience. She kissed his forehead as he grew old. And when he died, she did not cry in public. She was not his wife. She stood at the edge of the funeral, veiled and quiet, and returned home alone. Perhaps in the end she was given a small home, a pension, her freedom. Perhaps she became a midwife or took in other young girls, warning them of men with soft words and hard hearts. Or perhaps she faded into the crowd, another face in the Roman streets. But her story mattered. Because the Roman Empire was not just built by emperors and armies, but by the invisible ones. The concubines, the slaves, the women who bore the weight of empire without ever being seen. She was not honored in marble. No statue bears her likeness. No coin carries her face. But she lived. She survived. And through her Rome did too.